Coming up on This Week in Enterprise Tech, the NSA has a power trip, HP tells you that you can't go home again, we talk all about the man-in-the-middle attack, and Gartner predicts the end of mankind. Twyat on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twyat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, Episode 62, recorded October 14th, 2013. Man in the Middle. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by TechServe. TechServe assists U.S. businesses of all sizes with their technology needs, including Apple, Avid, Adobe, and HP solutions. Visit techserve.com/Twyat and receive a complimentary iPad deployment assessment. And by Full Sail University. Full Sail offers both online and campus degree programs centered on real-world experience in the entertainment, media, and technology industries. For more information, visit fullsail.edu/enterprise. And by GoToMeeting with HD Faces by Citrix, the powerfully simple way to meet and collaborate with coworkers and clients from anywhere. You can share the same screen and see each other face-to-face with HD video conferencing, even present from an iPad. Sign up for your 30-day free trial today. Visit GoToMeeting.com, click on the Try It Free button, and use promo code ENTERPRISE. Welcome to Twyat, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Ballas, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. But of course, I'm not guiding you alone. I'm joined by a stellar cast of characters, starting with my good friend, Mr. Brian Chi, the geek in paradise, the director of the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory at the University of Hawaii. Brian, how are things in the islands of breezes and suns?
Well, other than I must really and truly thank my British journalist friends for sharing this cold. It's just been no fun at all this last week on heavy antibiotics.
And folks, that just goes to show you, remember, if you want to be a good, responsible geek, don't share your sicknesses. Someone who isn't sick and back from a conference is another one of my good friends, Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, you're just getting back from Gartner, right?
I am indeed. I was at the Gartner Symposium IT Expo all week last week. I'm sort of dressed down today, coming out of the corporate wear, but it was a great experience. Looking forward to sharing some of that with the Twyat Riot, but happy to be back here in the studio in the swamp.
And of course, we're happy to have you back. Thanks to my co-hosts, Brian and Curtis, especially for coming in when they're busy, sick. You know, we just like to geek around, and that's why we're going to jump straight in to the Enterprise Byte. The first one, and I should have told my TD Jason earlier, deserves one of those sad trombone womp womp, that thing, that sound. You see, because we know that the NSA has been building up a multi-million, wow, fast.
Apparently it's in here.
I'm impressed. That's a default sound. $1.5 billion. We learned about this last year. Wired broke the story about how the NSA was building what amounts to a data center, a 1 million square foot data center, just chock full of switches and mostly hard drives, a storage array so they could store information on every email and phone call and whatever else electronic communication you can think of. Well, since that story broke, the estimate has gone from about 1.7 billion up to about 1.5 billion up to about 1.7 billion. The reason being that even though they were supposed to open this October, they've been losing hundreds of thousands of dollars due to power problems. That's right, not just brownouts, but we're talking about arc faults. I think Jason's got a video here of what an arc fault failure actually looks like. He'll pop it up as soon as, it's something like that. So imagine that happening in a data center. Now, they're not really clear as to why these arc faults are happening. They're not, of course, it's a super secret data center. They're not telling you what it's doing to the equipment, but if sources are to be believed, it is causing a tremendous amount of damage. Imagine some of the most cutting-edge equipment and then frying it. Chibert, I want to throw this over to you first because we know that they're using up a lot of power. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they chose Utah in the first place. They could get cheap power. They estimated that they could save between $39 and $45 million a year on the power costs alone. Another indicator is the fact that they could buy cheap land in Utah. But this seems to be negating this, right? I mean, because if you're getting cheap power, but you're blowing up everything that's connected to it, that's not a really good decision for IT, right?
No, it goes, basically it comes down to the contracting specs. When you're a large government organization, you're bound by purchasing laws. There are tons and tons of people called Contracting Officer Technical Reference. It's COTARs. It's the responsibility of the COTAR to go and evaluate the bid specs to figure out what's going on with the technical specs and to fix them or modify them for the contracting officer. My suspicion is that the COTARs involved have only had experience building smaller data centers. Building a really, really big data center is a very, very different thing. You know, from breakers that require you to pump, and then once you pump, you push an actuator button. That way it flips and you don't have problems with this arcing. I suspect that maybe, just maybe, there was some goofs in the contracting specifications, and that what they're having to do now is do a lot of fixes.
Right.
So, bummer.
I've been hearing from the interwebs that they're actually getting some interphase arcing within the equipment in the racks. Now, that almost boggles the mind, the fact that you've got that much equipment packed in that small of a space that you can jump phases. I've actually never had that problem. Have you ever heard of interphase arcing within a data center?
No, but if you ask Carl Arbach, I'm sure he does. Actually, we saw it at Interop back in 1999. And that was because someone went also low bid. The electricians didn't believe we needed a full 300 amps of power. And we actually set our breaker box on fire because of interphase arcing.
But it was beautiful. It was toasty, and beautiful.
Yeah, it was 3 fire extinguishers worth of beautiful.
Right. Now, let me take this away from the geek side and push it more towards the executive decision-maker side. Curtis, we know that this facility is designed to pull a constant 65 megawatts. That's enough to light about 33,000 average American homes. So we're talking, of course, of a really big power budget, far bigger than most enterprises are used to dealing with. But as an executive, say a CTO or a CIO who has to actually put that into the line item, how accustomed are executives to paying for their power, to understanding how big of a line item that's going to be and how that affects the overall ROI on decisions about purchasing equipment?
Well, I think that in most cases, the executives they're well aware that power is going to be a massive part of the budget on something like this, the same way that it would be for an industrial site. That they don't worry about. The thing that they do get upset about, this is one of those areas where they absolutely positively trust the engineering staff. They recognize that they are in an area of expertise that is far beyond what virtually anyone in the executive suite is going to have. So they depend on those engineering staffs to give them the correct answers, to make sure that everything just works. This is a case of things just not working. Now, it's highly likely that we're seeing people using very cutting-edge experimental hardware designs in this, but it's obvious when we're hearing just what we know about the problems that the engineering calculations have gone seriously awry. The thing that I worry about, frankly, equipment in the final analysis can be changed. You can bring in new equipment, you can roll in a new rack, you can write another check and they can bring more equipment. But arc faults on a scale that we're thinking about here kill people. I know when I've been working on publications where we dealt with industrial electrical issues, every year there are deaths that result from arc fault flashover, where someone not knowing what they're doing grabs a circuit breaker, pulls it, and just the arc from an expected operation can leap and kill them. This is something where I worry about the safety of the people involved, and I definitely hope that they get this resolved very, very quickly, not so they can spy on us, but just so that no one is killed in the startup operation.
Actually, that's a really, really good point. That equipment can be replaced, but there's something else that you need to look at. Not just the safety aspect, but, and I was mulling this over last night, if they are getting arc faults, it's not the equipment that's causing the arc fault. I mean, it's the actual design, it's the actual draw. There is a story here from the Wall Street Journal. Unfortunately, we don't have a link because if you try to go there, you're going to hit their paywall. But they quoted a Army Corps engineer who was saying that a report from the Army Corps of Engineers, which is now looking at the problem, and they're looking at the fixes that the contractors have put in. They're saying they don't think that those fixes are actually going to mitigate the arc fault problem. So we're looking at a future for this data center of having to either be radically redesigned so that they're distributing power more efficiently and more safely, or you're just going to have to put up with the regular loss of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and any of the data stored on that equipment. Cheebert, when do we call this a cluster stuff?
No, this is clearly, in my opinion, this is clearly a case of data center designers now having to learn how to deal with power levels that are on par with, say, a hydroelectric dam. You know, we got to keep in mind that the breakers on generators of that size, you know, when we start dealing with hundreds of thousands of amps at voltages, say, in the 600 to multiple thousand range, these things are no joke. I mean, you actually have to go and encase them and keep air movement away from them, just because the arcs that they will create under normal circumstances will set a lot of things on fire. So like the breakers that are typically used on ships actually have a separate room just for the breakers. And you actually pump them up with a special type of device that flips the breaker, but doesn't put anything in the way that might potentially catch fire. Arc faults are really, really, really dangerous. I actually saw one where some numbnuts dropped a wrench, and it actually went not even across the poles, but actually just close to across the poles. And the arcs hit both ends of the wrench and vaporized the wrench. That's how dangerous these things are.
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about a lot of power, 65 megawatt consistent draw. Yeah, that is a hydroelectric dam in most parts of the world. Now, our resident electrician has said that he would think that an arc fault would most likely be the fault of the power supplier, that somehow the data center is not getting enough power. But the story does note that the local power provider is saying, no, all our lines are green. We're giving them everything they want. In fact, we've got more capacity than they actually have asked of us. So that's why people are kind of puzzled. Again, we know that the project is shrouded in secrecy, but some of the attention has actually been turned away from the arc faults, from the most obvious cause, to something else, and that is heat. Now, Cheebert, I know that you are intimately aware of problems of heat in data centers. We've got a story here from the local paper talking about how Mark Reed, who is the Bluffdale city manager, he's the guy who's responsible for selling water to the NSA to cool this $1.7 billion data center, how he has said that they have a standing order for 1.7 million gallons of water a day. That's 1.7 million gallons of water a day just to cool the data center and the equipment within. Now, he's been saying that if you look at their chart, they've got days where they're pulling no water. They've got days where they're pulling 50% above what they ask for. So there's been, again, speculation that something is amiss, that perhaps their cooling is not in balance. Cheebert, take it away. Tell me, why do I have to be so concerned about cooling a data center, especially a data center of this size? Can't I just turn on a fan and be done with it?
No, unfortunately, you can't. The reason why they're pulling so much water is the typical cooling tower just can't get enough efficiency during an air-to-air, basic coil-to-air heat transfer. So what they're doing is they're using water, and I'm hoping and praying that they're being a little efficient about it, and at least running 3 cycles before they throw the water down into the drains. water does a very good job of pulling the heat away. But when you have giant cycles like that, that means their power load is not even. And it kind of tells me that maybe, just maybe, their planning and their loading of their power and heat isn't as they thought it was. And that maybe, just maybe, someone needs to go and take a really hard look, just step back and look at both power and cooling in the same breath and say, hey, why is the heat uneven? Why is the power uneven? Where is it all going? And maybe, just maybe, they need to add a whole bunch more metering in there to smaller sections to find out where all that extra power is going.
Right, right. Curtis, I remember hearing once at one of these conferences, I believe this involved an APC executive, so of course there was some vested interest in the statement, but he was saying, whatever you spend on power, you have to budget 1/3 of that for cooling, because anything that you're dumping into your data center, you're also going to have to be removing in some way, shape, or form. Does that formula still hold true today? And is that something that most IT executives are aware of, that power and cooling, even though they sound like the same thing, really need to be considered in different lights?
Well, I think they do, but remember, one of the things that we're looking at here, I suspect, and again, let's preface this with the fact that none of us, as far as I know, have been inside this thing.
Right.
Wait,
hold on. Let me stop you right there. Cheebert, you haven't been inside this thing, right?
Moi? No.
Is this a no, or is this yes, I have to say no?
I have not been to Utah in many years.
Okay, all right, good. All right. Continue, please, Curtis. Just making sure. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way.
Happy to do that. We're used to thinking about cooling in terms of racks of equipment for data centers, and that's a particular set of issues. And the fact is that the computer manufacturers have made enormous strides in both making the computers more efficient. They require less dissipation capacity for heat, and they're able to deal with more heat. So you have things like Dell, HP, IBM all now have systems that are ambient air cooled. You can load up a rack, fully configure it, and ambient air will cool it. You don't have to run the big Liebert air conditioning and air handling systems that you used to. The problem comes with electricity in the quantities and types that you're dealing with on a center like this. You know, when you look at a substation as you go by it, you see these giant cans with the big insulators coming off the top. Only a small percentage of those giant cans are taken up with the windings for the transformer. Most of that is oil capacity. The oil is there to dissipate heat. And when you're dealing with very high voltages, very high amperages, and you're doing any transformation on that at all, you're dealing with basic laws of physics, and you just have to deal with the heat. You know, really, we're getting beyond simple data center design with something this size. They've moved into true industrial scale design, and I suspect that's where the issue lives. If they had gone to the sort of people who are used to designing power distribution for, say, steel mills or steel processing facilities, they might not be having the same problems that they're having now, because those folks are used to dealing with current draws in the quantity and at the size that we're apparently seeing in this data center now.
Right, right. You know, we've got a humorous comment in the chat room from Web9916, and that's, why are we helping the NSA just let the stuff melt into a ball of slag? You know, it's funny, but the reason why we're bringing this up on Twite, of course, there is the NSA spy aspect to it, and it's kind of funny to make fun of the people who are spying on us. However, data centers like this are not going to be a rarity forever. I mean, you look down the major internet service providers, they would all love to have facilities like this, where you have a lot of equipment packed in a very small space, where you've got very efficient operation. So even though we can only guess what's going on right now, because so much of this is shrouded in secrecy, Cheebert, this could be a case study for data centers of the future, right? I mean, of course, Facebook's not going to have a 1 million square foot data center out in the middle of Utah, but they might have something a tenth of the size located around different points of the United States, where they can get super efficient computing and ultra efficient and ultra redundant backups, yes?
No, but maybe Google, Facebook, or Google Face. Yeah, Google Face might be. You know, if we start getting a lot of people merging and combining resources, we might start seeing data centers this big. And realistically, considering how the designs, the servers are going, they're getting more and more efficient and packing more and more CPU into a smaller space. We might start seeing giant heat loads. In previous iterations, if you had maybe 5K worth of heat per rack, that was considered pretty high. The amount of heat per rack has skyrocketed. Just the clusters that we're running here at the university, we're almost at 7.2K per rack.
Wow.
Which is a huge amount of heat per rack. And we've had to go to radically different cooling techniques, hot aisle, cold aisle, and actually putting cooling at the racks. A lot of people like saying, well, we're just going to use regular data center air, pull it in, and then we'll cool it coming out by putting water cooling doors on the back. I question how well that's going to work when you're starting to deal with, say, maybe 9K per rack. Can those water-cooled doors pull that much heat out that quickly? And, you know, what kind of spikes does that create?
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't done a lot of data center work, imagine 9K of heat getting pulled out of a rack. That, in not the old days, used to be the amount of heat that you would pull out of an entire data center. So now that you're pulling it out of every rack, of course, you can imagine the kind of concentration of heat you're getting. Now, Castle Bravo in the chat room he says, well, Google has probably already done this. You just don't hear about it because they did it right. Now, let's stop beating a dead data center and move on to the second story in our Enterprise Byte, and that's about Meg Whitman saying, no more telecommuting for you. I think this should, yeah, sad trombone, probably. Yeah, wait. Thank you. That's right. So in a move that is reminiscent of what we saw from Yahoo not too long ago, Marissa Mayer telling her staff, look, we need to batten down the hatches. We need to get the team back here. We need to build stronger cohesion among our programmers, our managers. Meg Whitman has said, yeah, what's good for Yahoo is good for HP. So she is slowly, quietly rolling out memorandums to the different departments, to the different parts of HP around the world, saying, we got to have you in the office. We gotta go into emergency mode, figure out what's going on, figure out what's happened to our product line, what's happening to our services. So I want you in the office, all of you, at the same time. Now, I should point out that there's a huge Grand Canyon-like gap between Yahoo and HP. Yes, they're both tech companies, but when Yahoo issued this everyone must come to the office memo, they had about 17,000 employees. HP has about 300,000. Cheebert, this seems to be a trend. We're seeing this at more and more companies in the Silicon Valley. Yahoo and HP make the headlines, but we're seeing small startups starting to say, look, we need you here. We actually have to have FaceTime. It's not enough for you to get your project done. We need your interaction with everyone else in the office. Is this a one-way turn? Are we now saying the telecommuter experiment of the 90s and 2000s is failed?
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a case of knee-jerk reaction because you got to keep in mind, you know, HP is a ginormous corporation. And realistically, I don't think they have enough desk space. So what I'm saying is, gee, maybe you need to start thinking about going halfway, saying, gee, maybe some people are going to have to come in maybe 2 or 3 days out of the week and the rest of the time work out of your home. Because remember, a lot of HP's sales force, a lot of HP's managers, Padre and I actually know a very good friend that's an HP manager. He has never had an office at HP. He's always working from his home because he's always on the road. Doesn't make sense. IBM has done this too. IBM actually kind of went into the middle ground and said, we're going to hot desk. We're going to move you folks around. You're going to come in on a regular basis, but you're going to hot desk. You're actually going to grab the first free desk, log into the phone system so that the phone system knows where to find you, and then log into the system. I love the fact that, they're saying, yeah, people need to get together. They need to physically intermingle. They're taking advantage of the water cooler network. They're taking advantage of people sharing lunch together so that they can talk and have a lot of off-the-record conversations. And I am a strong supporter of face-to-face meetings because there's a lot more things you can get done in face-to-face. However, there comes a point where, do you have enough space? Are you then creating a one-shift facility where that facility only gets used 9 to 5 and then suddenly it's dark the rest of the time, even though you've got staff all over the world? What happens? Are you creating an inefficient workforce by saying everybody has to come in, whereas maybe the answer is a little bit of both?
Yeah. Curtis, let me throw over to you, because there again, this is that huge gap between a Yahoo and a HP. When Yahoo issued that memorandum saying you must come in, everyone had an office. Everyone had a place to be. They just weren't there. They thought it was more efficient for them to work at home. Now, it's worked out really, really well for Yahoo. We've seen them become profitable. We've actually seen them with forward motion. So it seems to be a strategy that can work. But for HP, we're talking about at least 80,000 people in their workforce across the world who have never actually had a desk, ever. They've never had a cubicle, an office, a part of the building that belonged to them. They were hired and told to work remote. So how do you suddenly turn around and tell these 80, 100,000 people, no, we all want you in an office, oh, and by the way, you're going to have to find a place to fit?
I think it's going to be interesting. You know, there's an extent to which this reminds me of something that we saw a lot about a decade ago. You know, in the run-up to the first dot-com bubble, we had the real first wave of casual dress in the office. And around the time of a recession there, when the boom of the 90s was ending, I knew a lot of companies that said, we know what's wrong with our workforce. We all need to start wearing ties again. That will fix everything. And so a lot of people started wearing ties, and simultaneously, the economy got a bit better. And as the economy continued to improve, we saw the casual dress in many instances return because people were just more comfortable, more productive. I think that what we have are two large companies that know they have a problem. They don't know precisely what all the problems are, so they're going to try and shock their employees into figuring out what the problems are. Now, you're right. In the case of an HP, you can do the math. With 80,000 employees, if they don't already have desks for them, we're looking at a one-time charge of, maybe 20 to 30 million bucks. To find desks for all these people, to find office space, assuming they can get office space on the short-term rental market. I think this is a shock tactic to try and get the attention of all the employees. For that, it may well be successful, although I suspect they're going to lose some employees along the way. When I see something like this, though, it really strikes me as being an example of management that understands that they have a problem. They're just not real sure what the problem is. So they're going to try everything they can to get the employees to help them figure it out as quickly as they can. I hope that it works for both of them.
Right. I want to make one last note, and that is when Marissa Mayer issued her edict over at Yahoo, she acknowledged, look, this is an emergency measure. This is just because we're sinking. I want all hands on deck. I want to get all the best ideas out there. I want interaction among the employees. She left the door open for going back to telecommuting when it made sense. So we can only assume that there's a like strategy at HP, that they realize they're floundering. They realize that they need a bit more creativity. They're looking for the magic bullet. They're hoping that this is it. But I don't really think it's the end of the telecommuting era. Now, when we come back, we're going to be talking all about man-in-the-middle attacks. We're going to be breaking down the knowledge so that you understand a vector of attack that, well, you honestly should be concerned about. But before we go there, I want to take some time to talk about the first sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's TechServe. Now, I know that here on Twite, We don't talk nearly enough about Apple, and we know that Apple is a big part of the enterprise. And that's why I'm happy to welcome TechServe to the Twiat Riot, because they do know Apple, because they do understand how it works in the enterprise. As New York's premier authorized Apple reseller and technology provider, TechServe serves creative professionals at all levels, from individual customers to Fortune 100 companies. TechServe carries a full range of Apple products, from iPhones and iPads to iMacs, MacBooks, iPods, and accessories. TechServe also has a range of partnerships with top vendors to facilitate flexible, efficient, and creative solutions for all your business needs. TechServe assists businesses of all sizes to deploy Apple, Avid, Adobe solutions throughout the U.S., whether you're already committed to iPads or just getting started. From sales to support, process to practice, TechServe can help. Some amazing technology solutions are already being deployed on iPads by TechServe. If you've been to the Delta terminals in LaGuardia, Toronto, or Minneapolis, you may have noticed nearly every seat in the terminal is equipped with an iPad. Travelers can now sit anywhere in the terminal and receive real-time flight updates on the iPad and then use them to order food, play games, browse the internet, and check email while they're waiting. Over 1.5 million visitors used these iPads in Delta's terminals just this past year alone. The result has been a double-digit increase in food and beverage revenue and the highest customer satisfaction scores of all participating airports. OTG Management is the hospitality company behind Delta's terminals. They've turned to TechServe to provide, configure, and install the world's largest deployment of iPads, a number that just keeps growing as they add new terminals. And TechServe really was the natural place to turn because they sell, support, personalize, configure, and manage massive iPad projects. It's what they do. From the Delta terminals to a school with 700 chef instructors to an operation that delivered personally configured iPads to 3,000 cable technicians. TechServe is able to do full lifecycle management for all of your technology needs by providing the devices that you need, getting them up and running, teaching you and your staff how to effectively use them, and maintaining them so that they're working efficiently. TechServe also provides ongoing support so that if your enterprise has a problem, help is just a phone call away. So if you're considering adding iPads to your business, to your enterprise, why not ensure the project's success with the world's most experienced partner? If your business is considering integrating iOS technology at your workplace, then contact TechServe today and receive a complimentary iPad deployment assessment. Visit techserve.com/Twiat, and TechServe will help you assess your current or future iPad needs and give you advice to make it a success. That's techserve.com/Twiat. techserve.com/Twiat. And we thank TechServe for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let's get back to it. We've got another episode of Stuff My IT Guy Says. This time it's all about the man in the middle. I'm Father Robert Ballasser, the Digital Jesuit, host of Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech on the Twit TV network. I'm here at the Hot Stage warehouse for Interop, where we're setting up one of the most advanced temporary networks. And I thought it might be a good time for another edition of Stuff My IT Guy Says. This time I'm sitting next to Mr. Ken Bocchino from F5. Ken, thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure as always.
You've sort of been our security guru here on Twiat, and we thought that maybe we should touch on a topic that is near and dear to many a gray hat's heart, and that is the man-in-the-middle attack. Now, for the viewers at home, tell us in plain words, what is a man-in-the-middle attack?
Essentially, a man-in-the-middle attack is a third party injecting themselves in the normal communication flow between the end user and the server that they're trying to get to. And by injecting themselves in a way that doesn't alert the fact that either that they are being kind of monitoring the flow of this traffic.
Yeah, and of course that's because if it's not transparent, if it can be detected, it's not a very good attack.
Exactly.
Now, way back when, hypothetically, I may have known a person who did some sort of security work who used a tool called Cain and Abel, and it made man-in-the-middle attacks very easy because it actually had a button that you could click and it would start an ARP cache poisoning attack. How does that work? What is the ARP cache, and why does it allow you to do a man-in-the-middle attack?
So the ARP is a protocol that allows the resolution of essentially the layer 3 address, and it's typically used if you're a user trying to get to the internet to resolve the IP address or the L2 address of the gateway. So what Kane-Enable does is essentially it tells the end user that, hey, the gateway's L2 address is actually the man-in-the-middle attacker, and directs the traffic flow from that user to the laptop or the device that's gathering that data. And then it sends that data, because it knows the true gateway address from an L2 perspective, to the gateway. So essentially, it gathers traffic flow as it comes in and out of the environment, and it is a very simple, aggressive man-in-the-middle attack tool.
And it's a fairly effective attack because it is hard to detect. I mean, you may notice that there's a slowdown because your traffic's making another stop before it gets to the gateway, but unless you're really paying attention to what's going on, the kind of traffic you're getting, you wouldn't notice. Now, I know that most modern gear, if you're buying a modern enterprise class switch, you should be able to turn on certain features that will make that attack extinct. However, I have noticed that maybe once in a while when I've gone to a hotel and maybe clicked that button, I still do get an effective attack or two. Why is that?
So again, a lot of enterprises haven't actually deployed a lot of port security functionality. It's quite a simple attack, and if you think about it, you have a fair number of employees or contractors or staff that might be coming in and out of your building that could deploy this type of attack without detection. It's something that enterprises should be deploying, and hopefully the enterprises are, and the hotels will start doing that as well.
Yeah. All right, let's go past that. Let's look to a different attack, an attack on the interwebs. I'm specifically speaking about certificate attacks, SSL attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks for websites. How does that work?
So a lot of users don't necessarily validate that they're going to the actual website that they're trying to get to, right? So you can essentially use self-signed certificates and other tools or trickery to basically get a user to come to your own server that's kind of sitting in between the user and the actual server that they're trying to get to. And if the user is not aware of the SSL expiration process or what messages they might see, and they just click through and access the site and put their information in, they don't realize that even though they're SSL secured, they're actually going to a system that is not necessarily the true server that they're going through, but they're still seeing all the data that they would expect because it's a man in the middle.
Now let's move on to something that made a few waves this last summer at the DEF CON conference. There were some researchers from Spain who released a tool that, like Kane-Enable, allowed for a one-click, very quick man-in-the-middle attack utilizing an IPv6 stack installed into an IPv4 network. Now, I know that it utilizes a vulnerability in Slack, specifically in the 6 to 4 tool within the IPv6 stack, but how does that work?
So what's interesting around V6 is there's a whole slew of different technologies to allow connectivity from V4-only clients to V6-based services, and a lot of those involve tunneling. So when you talk about some of the newer platforms like Windows that support the V6 platform, there's some built-in tunneling technologies to allow for 6-to-4 translation, and that tunnels over the V6 or V4 space. So you can very easily actually trick a client into resolving to a V6 address, send that through a V6 to V4 tunnel, and then send that out to the tunnel termination point, which could be your man in the middle.
It could be, yeah. And basically you send them on a tunnel into your gear.
Yeah, and a lot of companies don't necessarily inspect, when it comes to outbound deep packet inspection, they don't inspect inside of these tunnels and don't realize that there's data flowing out of their enterprise.
Yeah. Okay, Ken, so we talked about 3 different types of attacks, 3 actually very different attacks. And the ARP cache poisoning, the certificate man-in-the-middle attack, and the 6-to-4 attack. Now, can you give our audience any easy to follow instructions, hints that might help them protect themselves against man-in-the-middle attacks?
First off, educate your users when it comes to how to best interact with your corporate resources and just general web best practices. And then if you're a corporate security resource, obviously stay up to date with the different tool sets that are out there, and then kind of come up with different ways to mitigate against them. And for the first example of Kane-Enable, at this point, the technology to
Turn it on.
prevent this type of attack is available and has been available for a while. So yeah, leverage the security tools that are already in place. Don't be afraid to push for that type of thing within your own enterprise.
Ken, thank you very much for talking to us.
Pleasure as always.
We'll have you again the next time we have a security question. I'm Father Robert Ballas. This is Stuff My IT Guy Says, and you've just been learned. Cheebert, man-in-the-middle attacks it's one of those things that should be extinct. We should have robust checks to make sure that you're actually speaking to who you're supposed to be speaking on the network. And yet, even the old ARP spoofing attack still works from time to time. I want to go back to you. I asked Ken about this and didn't give a great answer about why these attacks still work.
Well, you got to keep in mind that there's more than just the ARP poison, ARP cache way of getting in. One of the reasons why internet service providers have such tight security is that is a point of vulnerability. So say, for instance, if someone manages to hack in to, say, a DHCP server, and they go and stick a DHCP option in there for a proxy server. I've actually seen a demonstration, a live demonstration, where someone fed a proxy server to a machine and was able to intercept a secure ID secured SSL session going to a online trading company, and changed a trade where it's buying one share of one particular corporation, changed it to another. Really, really scary. And this was actually done with some relatively easy to get commercial off the shelf, actually Squid and a few other scripts. So no, it's not dead, because there are still a lot of people, oh, it's only my cousin, I want to show him where I work, or things like that, where it's more social hacking. It's not hard to hack you if you're at the ISP level. So my suggestion is, maybe you need to reconsider, the Tom, Dick, and Harry corner ISP, and maybe you might want to start thinking about a national firm of some sort that actually has some service agreements, and that actually maybe some of their people are actually bonded and they actually follow best practices for security. Those are some things you might want to think about.
Right. We've got Max1234 and Scrollminder in the chat room who are reminding us that what we're seeing a lot today, especially in a browser-based world, is we're seeing a lot of JavaScript, a lot of script man-in-the-middle attacks. And yes, those are also man-in-the-middle attacks. Anytime you can inject yourself within a session to capture information, capture traffic, capture packets, it is a man-in-the-middle attack. And in that sense, what we do, Cheebert, what we do at Interop, what we do in our respective networks, when we're monitoring traffic, we're actually a man-in-the-middle attack. Now, we're doing it for good reasons, for beneficial reasons. We're monitoring traffic so that we can actually know where there's congestion, where we need to put more resources, where we need to fix things. But, when we are talking about routed communications, there will never be an end to the man-in-the-middle attack. In fact, right now, I'd want Jason to switch over to my my laptop feed. This is Kane Enable. This tool has been around forever and ever and ever, and you can download this right now for free. It's not going to cost you anything. There's a button right here, this little thing that looks radioactive, that will allow you to launch an ARP poisoning attack. What I'd love for you to do, all of you to do, I'm not going to do it here because I'm not going to go ahead and start attacking the Twit network while I'm broadcasting from it, but I'd like you to download this tool, load it on your laptop, hopefully with the permission of your IT manager, and just run it against your network and see if you start getting traffic. I'm betting that at least 50% of you are going to get some traffic. You're going to find a segment of the network that isn't guarded against this really, really old attack, and that's just not good. Now, let me throw this over to Curtis. Curtis, when a tool this simple can be run on my laptop and give me traffic that I shouldn't see, it sounds to me that, a lot of enterprises out there, that the CTO or the CIO either know about this problem and they don't think that it's worth the cost to fix it, or they don't even understand how this works.
Well, I think that most executives believe it when their ISPs or their security appliance manufacturers, perhaps their various service providers for security or different routing services, tell them that it's covered. We've got you protected. Once they hear those words, they see a piece of paper that says that it's going to happen, they like to believe that it's not something they have to worry about anymore. It would be lovely if that were the case. But as you point out, the tools to cause these problems are ubiquitous. The ability to insert them into the corporate network is there. It's as close as your nearest careless employee. And so it is something that I think what we see are a lot of security officers worrying about with the express intent of keeping a lid on these things so that the executives never know they exist.
Right. Well, we're going to cover more about man-in-the-middle attacks because I actually want to show you in real time on the show how we're going to do a few of them. We're going to hit the wire, we're going to hit wireless, and yeah, we're going to hit a couple of browsers just to show you what you should be doing, how you should be testing your enterprise-class network to make sure that you're not vulnerable to some of the easier-to-do attacks. Now, when we come back, we're going to be talking all about Gartner. That's right, Curtis Franklin has his summer report, What I Did at Geek Camp. But before that, I want to take some time to talk about a relatively new member of the Twilight Riot, and that's Full Sail University. You know, thanks to advances in communications, in business technology, business practices, entrepreneurs have the potential to launch their business ideas to a wider audience. If you're looking to turn your ideas into a business, you need to be able to use those tools if you want to succeed. You could be the next Twitter, the next Facebook, the next Tesla, the next Apple. But you need to learn how to give your ideas their best chance at becoming as big as they can be. That's why we're happy to have Full Sail University as part of the Twilight Riot. Full Sail University's online innovation and entrepreneurship master's degree is an intensive 12-month program that guides students through the process of developing a tech-based product or service in a way that takes advantage of those advances in communication and business technology. Courses include topics such as the ideation process, project design and development, and financial strategies, all of which are taught by industry-experienced instructors, people who actually have done this in the real world. Full Sail University is centered on real-world education, so students graduate with a fully formed business strategy, not just theory, and the tools they need to pitch their product or service to potential investors. Through Full Sail's Project Launchbox program, students also receive a MacBook Pro preloaded with Apple's complete line of creative software tools, as well as degree-specific sets of pro-level applications. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to check out Full Sail University. Full Sail offers a variety of master's degrees in related fields, including internet marketing, business intelligence, and public relations. They may be right for you. To learn more about Full Sail's master degree or their programs in innovation and entrepreneurship or any of their related programs, please check out fullsail.edu/enterprise. That's fullsail.edu/enterprise. And we thank Full Sail for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Let's get to what I think is the juicy part of the program, and that is Curtis Franklin coming back from Gartner with all the juicy tidbits about the future of the enterprise. Now, Curtis, first of all, please, for those who are playing at home, tell us what Gartner is and why it's not just another conference.
Well, Gartner is an organization. It's a consulting company that, frankly, is employed by virtually every large enterprise that has any IT, which means virtually every large enterprise. The analysts at Gartner do a lot of market research. They are always doing surveys, they're doing questionnaires, they're talking to executives, they're talking to people who put their hands on things, and using that information to come up with predictions and strategies for companies. They do everything from advising companies on the best way to maximize the economic impact of their Microsoft licensing plan to telling CIOs what they should be investing in for the next 10 years. Once a year, they have a huge gathering of their customers and their analysts in Orlando, Florida. It's called the Gartner Symposium and IT Expo. That's what I was at last week. They have probably 75 different meetings around the world every year. This is the big one. And a lot of people were paying attention. I was frankly surprised that there weren't more members of the press there. But several things that they said have gotten a lot of attention, and not always in that sort of happy, shiny, optimistic way that we're used to in the IT industry. There were a couple of phrases that they brought out that frankly have some people spooked. And I think it's worth talking about those with our Twiat crew today.
Oh, I see. Oh, wait,
Now,
did we just lose your audio?
no,
Okay, there you are. Okay.
no, I'm right here. I was just pausing for breath.
Now, why don't you drop some of the big topics and trends that you saw at the conference?
All right. Two of the big ones. Gartner is big on coming up with catchphrases and words. The two that we heard a lot about this time were digitalization. Now, that's much different than digitization, and the digital industrial economy. Now, digitalization, as they define it, is the conversion of an entire business model to a digital first model. And that's true whether we're talking about the standard knowledge workers that we're all used to, or manufacturing, or transportation, or agriculture. They see the future of all of these industries, basically all of human endeavor, being one that goes to a digital first strategy. And if you're not already looking down that path, well, you're going to be consigned to the dustbin of history. That's part of another catchphrase, the digital industrial economy. This is the point at which the digital side of things, all of those bits and bytes that make up the information, and the physical side come together. Now, we've talked about this through things like 3D printing, and there was a lot of talk about 3D printing at Gartner, but they also were talking about things like the incredible rise in the number and power of sensors that are being put in virtually every item to come out of any manufacturing process. Tie it all together, and we're talking about some enormous changes, not just for business, but for society in general over the next 10 years.
Okay. So I see here in your notes that Gartner was estimating a loss of at least $100 billion per year in intellectual property because of 3D printing. Does that sound as doom and gloom as it looks like it is on paper? I mean, is Gartner actually saying, look, this rush to 3D printing is going to destroy your capability to control your product, to control your ideas?
Well, what they're saying is that you're going to have to change the way you think about your property and your ideas. And the examples they gave were right out of the manufacturing. I know if you follow the news, you're aware that a lot of, say, high-end luxury good manufacturers have to deal with this issue of counterfeits. Go to any big city, you can buy a Rolex watch for $29 from some guy off the street. The same is true of a Louis Vuitton handbag or a pair of Levi's in some of the third world nations. These are things where people have copied the major parts of the look and feel, put in inferior, much cheaper workings, and come out with a counterfeit. Every dollar that is not spent on the original company is a dollar lost to the counterfeiters. And that's the kind of loss that they're talking about. When you have things like 3D scanners, how easy will it be to take an industrial item, some component of an overall thing, maybe an auto part, maybe a machine part, maybe a piece of artisanal jewelry, copy it, reproduce it en masse, and take away potential sales? That's the kind of cost and loss that Gartner is talking about. And that's the sort of thing that's not just a problem for the huge manufacturers, that's a problem for the individual artists who make their living on being able to bring out one or two things a week, a month, even a year because they're difficult to copy. What happens to that part of the economy when essentially nothing is hard to copy?
Right. Okay, I want to talk about the second bullet point that you've put into the notes, and that is by 2020, enterprises and governments will fail to protect 75% of sensitive data and will therefore declassify and grant broad public access to it. Where do they pull these numbers out? Man, this is one of the things that has always frustrated me about Gartner is they tend to be right. I mean, in the long view, they tend to have a really good grasp of trends, but where are they pulling those numbers? Well, how can they tell me that a 3/4 of the data that governments and companies are supposed to protect is going to end up publicly accessible?
Well, in this case, I think what they're doing is looking at some trends. They've done a lot of surveys of security people, and because of the relationship, people do tend to give Gartner folks access to information, knowing that it's going to be confidential in the individual and just used in aggregate for things like these predictions. What they're saying is that we have already seen so much being lost to theft or carelessness. And as we look at how much is being declared sensitive, we're reaching a point where security professionals are saying, I just can't afford to secure all that I'm being told to secure. So what are the options? Well, you can start spending vast portions of your enterprise budget on security, or you can do as Gartner is recommending and say, let me break this down into the stuff that's truly sensitive, the stuff that is truly critical to my organization if it gets out, and that stuff that I am right now classifying as sensitive just as a matter of routine. They're saying that the stuff that is truly sensitive will be examined, declared sensitive, and truly well protected, while much of the stuff, there's that 75%, that today we're just classifying because it's habit, is going to be declared open for everyone and worried about to a much smaller extent.
Right. I do want to address the chat room because there's a few people in there who are they're a little suspicious of Gartner, and rightfully so, because I feel the same way. But I do have to note, I will give Gartner their due here. They have been right on several trends that many people missed. They were right about the move towards thin clients way before it actually started being a viewable trend. They were right about smartphones and smart devices outpacing laptops and desktops, and they've predicted that like 6 years ago, 7 years ago. They were right about the commoditization of network hardware. So we're talking about an organization that in the long run actually has a really good track record of spotting trends before they actually become trends. Oh, there is another trend here that I want to group the next 2 points together. They mentioned at the conference that by 2020, the labor reduction effect of digitalization will cause social unrest, and by 2020, most knowledge workers' career paths will be disrupted by smart machines. Okay, now this almost sounds like we're heading into a science fiction movie here. This is Skynet. Well, exactly what is Gartner saying when they say these knowledge workers' career paths are going to be disruptive and that we're going to see a labor reduction effect because of digitization?
Okay, let's take those in reverse order. For the second one, the knowledge worker, let's take the example of a stock trader. We're already seeing stock, bond, commodity trades happening at such a rate that humans can't keep up. Machine trading, automated trading, program trading, call it what you will, is a fact. And to this point, we have said, well, we need human beings as the circuit breakers. We need some human being watching over these systems to make sure that if things go off the rail, we'll be able to correct it. Now, we've seen several occasions where human beings weren't able to react until things had gone off the rail to the tunes of 1,000-point drop. But still, that's the thinking. What Gartner is saying is that the machines the systems, the computers that learn, are getting good enough that we're not going to trust human beings to step in. We're going to trust the systems to step in. And if you don't need a human being standing watch over the system while it does its trading, then that is a knowledge worker, a stock trader who no longer has a job, at least not one doing what they have been doing. They say that because of the growth in the capability of the systems, that there are going to be more and more positions that we think of as knowledge workers that will be first assisted and then augmented and finally replaced by these intelligent computer systems. You know, they pointed out, we've always said, well, human beings will be around because we haven't seen a system where the computer is smarter than the people are. They point out that there really are a number of installations, a number of places where we are calling the systems smarter than the people. These come from smaller things like the traction control and braking control and stability control in our cars, to these more advanced systems like the stock trading, even to things like healthcare, where we're depending upon machines to analyze image, analyze data, and present the findings to a professional rather than having a human being go through and read all those lab reports. The question becomes, what will this do to the labor pool? You know, I told a Gartner analyst while I was speaking that I tend to fall back on something that I believe it was Robert Heinlein wrote when he said that any job that a machine could do better than a human was beneath the essential dignity of a human to do. I'll still hold to that, but it means that we're going to have far more jobs in the next decade that fall below that dignity threshold for human beings. What are we going to do to replace those?
Yeah, all I can say there is there's no way they're ever going to develop a machine that could replace a podcast host, right?
Right? I think you're safe, Padre.
Okay,
I think you're safe.
Cheebert, I want to get your side on this because, you know, Curtis comes admittedly from the more enterprise executive side. As an engineer in the trenches, what's your general feel anytime you get some of these spectacular predictions from Gartner?
Okay, first off, let's do a really short lesson in how you aggregate opinions from lots and lots and lots of experts. Someone in the chat room was saying, yeah, the watch is stop clock is always right twice a day. Well, there's a thing called Delphi theory. And what it is it's a fairly basic system, but you take the opinion of lots and lots and lots of experts. Delphi basically throws out the top and bottom because those are probably people that have an axe to grind. But it aggregates them together and comes up with numbers. Now, the interesting thing is Delphi theory postulates that if a lot of experts actually do agree, then maybe there really is something there. And do they agree on the numbers? So the stronger the numbers, the closer the numbers are together, the higher the degree of trust is. Delphi theory has been around for a long, long, long time, and it harks back to the Oracle at Delphi. And so if you have the money, and Gartner certainly does, you can afford to keep an awful lot of experts on staff or on retainer so that at the moment's notice, they can go and ask their opinion and aggregate them together with something along the lines of Delphi theory. I suspect Gartner has spent a lot of money fine-tuning Delphi and making it much, much more valuable, and probably the reason why some of their predictions are so accurate.
Well, Cheebert, you know, I don't need Delphi theory to know what's going to happen next, because next we're going to be talking about the last sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and of course, that's my good friends over at Citrix with GoToMeeting with HD Faces. Now, building a strong relationship with your team, with your clients, your customers, your colleagues, your coworkers is absolutely essential. It's in meeting face-to-face. It's in actually hearing the ideas, hearing people think, that we come up with problem-solving solutions, that we come up with inspiration, that we come up with the things that make business successful. But meeting face-to-face is not always practical. You see, sometimes we're in different offices, we're in different buildings, we're in different cities, in different countries, different parts of the world. That's why when you need to meet, we always turn to GoToMeeting with HD Faces by Citrix. It's the powerfully simple way to meet online and see each other face-to-face. Now, with GoToMeeting by Citrix, you can share screens, making it easier for your team to be on the same page because you can guide them through a program sheet, through a proposal, through a spreadsheet, whatever it might be. You can show them on their computer and let them interact with you to let the ideas grow organically. And if you turn on your webcam, you can make your meeting turn into a video conference with just a button click. Plus, you can launch or join a meeting from anywhere using your computer, your mobile phone, your tablet. It's so easy because it runs everywhere you need it to run. It's mobile, it's desktop, it's laptop. It's where you need to be. You can even present from your iPad. How's that for mobility? Now, I'm not just a spokesperson for GoToMeeting. I actually use it on, I'd say, a daily basis. You see, my work has me meeting with hundreds of coworkers and colleagues each month, and I have to give each one of them FaceTime. The old way I used to do it is to jump on a plane and fly out to wherever a group of them are, give them their FaceTime so I could actually see their facial expressions, so I could see what they were thinking. But that got expensive, and honestly, that just got too tiring. It's really bad for your health. So I turned to GoToMeeting, and I haven't looked back. Not only do I get to meet with more people, but I don't have to jump into a plane every time I want to do it. And with HD video conferencing, I can actually see that raised eyebrow or that subtle frown. I can see someone tilting their head when they need more information. All that data lets me do my job that much better. I switched to GoToMeeting with HD Faces, and let me tell you, it not only saved my company money, but it saved my sanity. I love GoToMeeting. It's easy to use, and with HD Faces, it's just like meeting in person. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to see if GoToMeeting can do for you what it did for me. You can try GoToMeeting free for 30 days. For this special offer, visit GoToMeeting.com, click the Try It Free button, and use the promo code ENTERPRISE. Remember, use the promo code ENTERPRISE to help out Twiet. GoToMeeting, meeting is believing. And we thank Citrix for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, you've done it again. You've used up another hour of your time listening to the best dang podcast this side of the universe. No, really, I took a poll. That's all true. I want to thank my panelists for being back here, my co-hosts. Cheebert, let's start with you. Again, thank you for coming in, especially when you're ill. What should the Twiet Riot know about you and your work when you're actually back up on your feet? Where can they find you?
Well, I can be found at www.ancl.hawaii.edu. That's the website for the lab, and you can actually find some live webcams, and you can play peekaboo. I'm actually going to sign off in a short while and head down to the University of Hawaii Harbor facility because I need to go and fix some fiber optics for our new remote-operated vehicle that we just got. It seems to have a flat tire in the fiber optics world.
Flat, that could be a show title, Flat Fiber Tire. Go figure.
Yeah,
thanks again, Cheebert. It's always great to have you. Curtis, again, I know that you've been busy. You've been running around. You weren't with us last episode because you were at Gartner. Thank you for coming back and sharing the knowledge. Tell the Twiet Riot where they can find you, what's going on in enterprise efficiency. We had a fantastic episode not too long ago from Interop. Where can they find more of that?
Well, we're going to be doing more Interop follow-up. I'm going to have a number of the speakers from the Interop conference on E2 Radio. I've also, if people are interested, got a slideshow coming up with the rest of those 10 strategic predictions for the coming decade. So check over at enterpriseefficiency.com to see what's coming up on E2 Radio and find my articles, because I would truly love to have the ideas from the Twiet Riot over there. Come on, add your voice. We'd appreciate it.
Curtis, Cheebert, it's one of my favorite times of the week when I get to talk to you. So again, thank you so very much. You know who else I want to say thank you to? I want to say thank you to you. That's right, the viewer, the listener, the person who has downloaded our podcast or is watching it live right now. Because without you, we wouldn't get to play at Twiet. We wouldn't get to gather together all these news stories, all these little tidbits about life in the enterprise. And so I want to do something for you. What I want to do is I want to give you an easy way to get all of our episodes onto your devices automatically. That's right. It's just going to pop up if you go to our show page at twit.tv/Twiet. There you'll find a couple of drop-down menus that will let you choose your device of choice. Do you want Twiet audio on your iPhone? Sure. You want the high-resolution video on your iPad? We can do that. Do you want all the versions on your laptop, your desktop, your Android phone, your Android tablet, your Zombie Zune? We can do that because we care. Of course, we know that some of you don't like consuming straight from twit.tv, which is why we also have a YouTube channel. That's right. If you go to youtube.com/Twiet, you'll find not just all of our episodes, but it's where we put up our individual segments. Stuff My IT Guy Says, The Data Center, The Data Closet, IT, Pro Gear. It's where you got to go to get learned. Also, did you know that we do this show live? That's right. Every Monday at noon Pacific time, we're here at the Twit Brick House in Petaluma to give you the best dang podcast in the universe. And if you watch live, you get to see how the sausage is made. Not just the finished product, but pre-show and post-show, any of the bloopers. It's just one of the things that we do for our audience. And as long as you're watching the live show, why not drop into our chat room at irc.twit.tv. There you'll be able to find some of the most fascinating people, brilliant engineers, funny people, and yes, some very entertaining trolls. It's all part of the experience that is Twit TV. I also want to thank everyone here who makes this show possible, to Carson, my super producer, and to Jason Howell, my TD, who, by the way, it's my understanding that you have a show that talks almost completely about Android. What's that show called?
All About Android.
And when do you do that?
Tuesday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific, live.twit.tv. I should actually say tomorrow could be interesting for Android. It's rumored that we're going to find out about the next Nexus device, as well as details around KitKat, the next version of Android. Hopefully we see that tomorrow, and if so, tomorrow night's All About Android is one not to be missed. twit.tv/AAA.
AAA. And of course, that's Jason Howell. That's the guy who keeps everything switching. Believe me, it's a tough job because I don't always tell him what we need. I'm Father Robert Balaser, and I want to remind you that if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.